So last part of the chapter is about something called price discrimination, and that is simply when a firm can charge different prices to different consumers for the same thing. Now this happens all the time, and it doesn't have to be a monopoly, but it can't be perfect competition, because in perfect competition everybody pays the same price. Everybody pays the same price, and all the producers get paid the same price. So in perfect competition, the price is just fixed. Nobody can change it. So if you're a monopolist, or even close to a monopolist, though, you don't have to do that. You have some control over the price, and you can make the price different for different consumers. Really common example would be a lower price for students, or a lower price for kids, or a lower price for seniors. Now, why would a firm charge lower prices for those people? For you guys, why would you get a lower price for certain things? Why would the firm do that? Do they feel bad for you? No. It's about profit, right? Of course it's going to be about profit. Now, what's different about you guys, or seniors, or little kids, is you don't have as much money, right? And so your demand for especially luxury things would be very, very low at regular prices. But if you get some sort of student discount, then you might buy the good. And so the firm will do that because they want to make more money, right? Regular prices might mean that students don't buy at all from the firm. Slightly lower prices mean the students will buy from the firm, and so then they'll make more money. Okay, so price discrimination is to help the firms make more money. Now, you guys in the back, I know you're super excited about something. Maybe price discrimination, I'm not sure. But for everybody's sake, I need everybody to try to be quiet. All right, so price discrimination is when a monopolist charges different prices to different groups of consumers. Okay, so it's a pretty common thing. Other examples here, coupons, right? So if you have the coupon, you get to pay the lower price, and if you don't have the coupon, you have to pay the regular price. Different costs for cell phone plans, depending on the time when you're allowed to talk. Different prices for airline tickets or hotel prices, right? There's lots of examples in the travel industry where prices will be different depending on, I don't know, how you book the tickets or what time the flight is or whatever. Anyway, so there's lots of reasons, lots of examples. Now, how do firms do it, though? How do firms do it? So sometimes, like say with a student discount, you can, they might ask to see a student ID, right? So some sort of proof that you are a student. But often they can't do that. They can't make a person really prove that they are, a certain classification. But sometimes how they do it is just in terms of the timing. So both the airline tickets and then the cell phone plans, they take advantage of what they know about people's demand at different times. So with your cell phones, for example, usually it's more expensive to use your phone, like talk on your phone, during the week, during the day, and then it's cheaper if it's on the weekend or in the evening. And then the difference is that if you're talking on your phone in the evening or on the weekend, you're probably talking to friends or family, right? And so then your demand is more elastic, you're more flexible about when you talk and how long you talk and so on. But if you're talking on your phone during the week, during the day, then it's more likely some sort of necessary call, like you're calling to make an appointment, for example, right? And so then they know that your demand is more inelastic. And if your demand's more inelastic, it means you're willing to pay higher prices and you'll still talk. And then airline tickets are the same. The prices will depend on when you're flying. So for example, if you're trying to go somewhere during the week, like somewhere between Monday and Friday so that you're home before Friday, versus if you're going somewhere for the weekend, it's the same thing. Right? On the weekend, you're probably going to visit friends or family, so you're more flexible, you're more elastic. Whereas if you're going somewhere during the week, or like on a specific day, then it must mean that your demand is more inelastic, like there's some necessity for your travel. Okay. So they're looking for differences in elasticity and then income. What I was talking about before with student and senior discounts, right? It's about an income difference. They know that students and seniors have a lower income. Okay, so what they're doing is they're trying to figure out, the firms are trying to figure out and price accordingly to take advantage of differences in people's income and preferences and necessities. Oh, another example is, have you ever gone as a tourist somewhere? And then there's been different prices for things for tourists versus locals. Have you ever done that? Right, so like in some places you'll go and they'll know you're a tourist, and so then they'll charge you higher prices compared to the locals. It's the same reason, right? They know as a tourist you probably got more money than the locals, so they'll charge you higher prices. Okay, so price discrimination allows monopolists to charge higher prices. So higher prices will be for people with a higher income and who have stronger preference or feel that it is, like have a stronger feeling that that's a necessity. So that would make their demand more inelastic. Okay, so higher incomes or who are less price sensitive, so more inelastic. And then they will charge lower prices for the opposite, people who they think have a lower income or whose demand would be more elastic. So the firms are just trying to make more money, but it's actually a good thing for the consumers as well, especially those consumers with a lower income or whose demand is more elastic, because at the regular price, they might not buy the good at all. But if they can get a lower price, then they will buy the good. All right. Another kind of price discrimination is kind of what's happening, say, today, right? Black Friday. So things are on sale. Now, stores, they don't just have a constant lower price. What most stores do is they have a high regular price, and then they put the good on sale. And then it goes back to the regular price, and then it goes on sale. It goes back to the regular price and goes on sale. And that kind of takes advantage of differences in elasticity as well, because if you're a person who, say, is very thrifty, and so your demand is very elastic, you would just not buy the good at the regular price. But when it's sale time, you'll plan for it, you'll wait till the sale goes on, then you'll buy the good. Or if there's, say, some sort of emergency, like, say, at Canadian Tire, you know, a lot of things that they sell, like, say, winter shovels, they might have it on sale one week, and then the next week maybe it'll snow. But all the people who planned ahead had already bought the snow shovels at the sale price, and everybody else who didn't plan ahead, they would have to pay the regular price for the snow shovels, right? So it's different prices, but it's because of differences in people's elasticity, and of course everybody's different. All right, now here we have an example about an airline. So it's a monopolist, so it's the only airline flying into this place. And we have two basic groups of people, the students and the business people, who have obviously very different demand curves. Now, if the monopolist were a single price monopolist, so let's say that they could not for some reason charge different prices, they had to just charge one price. So in this market here, the equilibrium between MC and MR would be here. Price would be 500. Okay, so if they charge that same price to everybody, students would not buy the good at all, right? Way too expensive for the students. So at that price, only the business people would buy airline tickets. They would buy a quantity of 150, and then we can calculate the profit. So the cost, marginal cost, average cost is $100. So price minus average cost times the quantity, they would make a profit of $60,000. In the market for the students, MR equals MC here. Quantity would be 120 in that market. Price would be 200. So if they want the students to buy tickets, they can charge a price of $200. And if they charge the same price for everybody, they would sell more in this market too, because at that lower price, then the business people would buy more tickets, but the profit will be lower. All right, so now if they charge $200 for everybody, price 200 minus average cost 100, 350 would be the total quantity, right? So at that price, they would sell 230 in that market and 120 in that market. So the total would be 350. So then they would make a profit of $35,000. So they wouldn't want to do that. If they had to only charge one price for everybody, then they would obviously pick this price here, $500, because that's going to give them more profit. But what will give them even more profit is if they can price discriminate. So if they charge $500 to the business people, then in that market they will make this profit here, and charge $200 to the students, and then the profit for the students would be 200 minus 100 times 120, so $12,000 of profit in the student market. And so then that is even more profit. So that would be an example of how the price discrimination allows them to make more profit. But again, it's also good for the students, because if they just charge the $500 price, none of the students would be able to afford a ticket. And now the students can afford a ticket. So it's better for the consumers as well as for the monopolist. Okay. All right. This is just some notes about what I was already talking about. Okay. So one thing down here, though, when price discrimination happens and one group gets to pay a lower price compared to another group, then the monopolist has to be careful to try to prevent arbitrage, which is if the people who paid the lower price bought a bunch of the good and then went themselves to the people who were willing to pay more and sold it to them directly, right, rather than the monopolist selling it to them, right? So if students could somehow buy a bunch of airline tickets at $200 and then go and sell them to the business people for $500, and then the students pocketing the profit, that would be great for the students, but that's not going to help the monopolist make profit. Okay, so that's something called arbitrage. Okay, so the last thing for price discrimination is called perfect price discrimination. And this is when, this would be when a firm, it's not actually possible, but theoretically it would be if a firm could charge each consumer his or her exact willingness to pay. So we all have different willingness to pay for things, right? Because we have different incomes and different preferences and so on. And so if the monopolist could somehow know exactly what your personal willingness to pay was and they made you pay that price, what would your consumer surplus be? Like if you were willing to pay $10 for the good and they made you pay $10 for the good, how much surplus would you have? None, right? You'd have zero surplus, yeah. But for the monopolists, of course, that would be fantastic because they could make as much profit as possible. Okay, so this is something that isn't actually possible because they would have to be able to read your mind. But I did see an article in the news last week. I think it was Google. Google's trying to invent technology to read our minds. And I don't know how it would work, but it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to do that, right? And I don't know how well it would work. But anyway, so firms can't really do that. But they do collect a lot of information about us, right? They store our information when we shop online. Like they store information about like what we were looking at and what we've purchased and what prices we've paid for things. And whenever you store cards, you know, a lot of stores have store cards that you use to get points or whatever. That's also a way for them to store information. And what they're doing is they're trying to figure out your preferences, like what sort of things are you buying, what prices are you willing to pay, right? And then they can possibly charge different prices. So travel websites are the best at this so far. Travel websites store all the information about things that you've done online on their website, right? And so then if you have paid high prices before, then when you go to look for prices for some new vacation, they will actually quote you higher prices, right? So I think it was on Marketplace, they did an episode where they had a group of people all look for exactly the same airline flight on different computers, and they all got quoted different prices for exactly the same flight because they all had different histories, like search histories on that website. Anyway, okay, so perfect price discrimination. So that's when a monopolist charges each consumer his or her exact willingness to pay. Okay, so what that will mean then is that your marginal willingness to pay, or the price that you're willing to pay for the good, is the firm's marginal revenue then. So like I say, I'm willing to pay $10. They make me pay $10. They sell me the good. They have a marginal revenue of $10. And then let's say you're willing to pay $8. So they sell you the good for $8. Their marginal revenue is $8. So if I'm willing to pay 10 and you're willing to pay 8, then that's their marginal revenue. So the marginal revenue is just the demand curve then. It's the price, the demand price that consumers are willing to pay for each unit. So the price then is different for everybody. So this is different from anything that we've talked about before, right? With perfect competition, or earlier in this chapter for just a single price monopolist, the price is the same for everybody. But in this example, the price would be different for everybody. Each extra unit that they sell will have a different price. And so then they will continue to make the good as long as the marginal revenue covers the cost. So they will continue up to this point. They will produce this quantity here. So that's the efficient quantity, but unfortunately the whole surplus area will be just producer surplus or profit for the monopolist. There we go. So this whole area will be profit or producer surplus, and they will produce the quantity Q star. So there is no deadweight loss then, but there's also no consumer surplus. So the total surplus is producer surplus. Oh, sorry, that's way too big. Can't see it all. There you go. So there's no deadweight loss, no consumer surplus. The whole area is producer surplus. Okay, so let's just compare that to the surplus areas for a single price monopolist, which you guys learned about last class. So for a single price monopolist, you have a separate marginal revenue curve. Right here, the demand curve and the marginal revenue curve are the same only because the price is the demand price, which is the marginal revenue, and it will be different at each point along the curve. But for a single price monopolist, they have to charge the same price for everybody. And so then, going this way, as they charge lower prices, they will sell more of the good, but the price is going down, quantity is going up. So their marginal revenue becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until at some point marginal revenue became negative, but we don't show that part of the curve. Anyway, so for a single price monopolist, they have the separate marginal revenue curve, and they will only then produce up to this point here, right? They will produce all the units for which their marginal revenue covers the cost, so just up to that point. And then going up to the demand curve, this was the price that they would charge for everybody, so a single price monopolist. So consumers would pay that price there, and so then the consumer surplus would be here, and the producer surplus would be the trapezoid shape between the price and the marginal cost. But then there would be deadweight loss because this quantity that's being produced by the monopolist is less than the efficient quantity. The efficient quantity is over here, Q star, and so then there's deadweight loss. All right, any questions? Yeah.
Can this not be done by like the other type of food, like competitive?
No, so in a perfectly competitive market, nobody gets a discount, right? There's no price discrimination. So like say student or senior discounts or kids pricing. That will happen, say, at a movie theater, but not if you just go to the grocery store and you're wanting bananas, for example. Right? You're not going to get a discount on bananas. Yeah. And so in a perfectly competitive market, the firm will not lower the price for students or seniors because there's so many consumers who are willing to pay the regular price that they don't need to. But for a movie theater, you don't have countless consumers that are buying the good, right? It's not as big of a market as, say, the market for bananas. And so they know then that some consumers would just not buy the good unless they're given a discount. Yeah. All right, so last page of the notes, and then, so we'll do this, and then I'll give you guys a break, and then we'll do the assignment. Okay, so we have a supply curve and a demand curve and a marginal revenue curve. So you learned about this last class. Remember, when you're deriving a marginal revenue curve, it has the same vertical intercept, but twice the slope of the demand curve. And so that's why they're drawn the way they are, right? They both start at the same point here, but then the marginal revenue curve is twice as steep. So it would go to about there. Okay, supply curve starts at 5, and it's pretty, so supply curve is pretty steep compared to those ones. We'll draw it going up quite quickly. Okay, so if it's a single price monopolist, they're going to choose this equilibrium here to maximize their profit. So we need to figure out that quantity, which we might have already done. Yeah, okay, you know what, we already calculated some of this on page 11. We had the same functions on page 11. So, okay, so that's good. So we know from page 11 that this quantity here is 70. And this equilibrium quantity is, oh, I don't have that one. Okay, we'll have to figure out that one. But the price we already figured out on page 11 is $33. Okay, so we will need the Q star. This would be Q star here, where MC equals demand. Okay, 87.5. Good. Okay. So if this is a single price monopolist, calculate consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss. All right, so consumer surplus, consumers pay $33. So the difference between demand and the price, that will be consumer surplus. And producer surplus will be this trapezoid shape. And so we actually need this number then too, so that we can calculate that area. So that number will be, so the quantity here is 70, and then you could use either the marginal cost function or you could use the MR function because they're equal at that point. So you could use either one. I think it's 26. Good. Okay. Okay, so now we can calculate that producer surplus. So I'm just going to use the formula for a trapezoid. So height 1, 33 to 5, that's 28, plus height 2, 33 to 26, that's 7. Okay, and then dead weight loss. If the monopolist can perfectly price discriminate, calculate consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss. All right, so perfect price discrimination will mean that we don't have this separate MR curve. It would mean that the demand curve is the MR curve, and so then the firm would produce the good all the way up to here. So the price they're paid is here, here's their marginal cost. So as long as the price covers the marginal cost all the way up to there. So they will produce 87.5, but they will get paid everything. The consumers will give them their maximum willingness to pay. So consumers will get nothing. Producers will get the entire surplus triangle. So okay, so 40 minus 5 times 87.5. And then, because the quantity produced is Q star, there's no deadweight loss.